Arizona Territory, 1878. The sun had already disappeared behind the distant red mesas when Clara Bennett carried the last bucket of water toward her family's small homestead. Her arms ached. Her hands were rough from years of work. A loose strand of chestnut-brown hair had escaped from beneath her faded blue bonnet, and dust covered the hem of her worn dress. She had been working since before sunrise, but there was still more to do. There was always more to do. The chickens needed feeding. The horse needed tending. The broken fence needed repairing. The supper needed preparing. And her father would eventually return from town. Clara dreaded that last part most of all. She stopped beside the water trough and looked toward the road. Nothing. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe. The silence of the prairie was peaceful. She wished she could stay in it forever. But peace never lasted long in the Bennett household. Clara had been 22 for several months, yet she sometimes felt much older. Her mother had died years earlier, leaving Clara to become the woman of the house, while her father slowly disappeared into bitterness and alcohol. At first, Thomas Bennett had only drunk occasionally. Then came the gambling, then the debts, then the angry words. Eventually, drinking became the center of his life. Clara had tried everything. She had begged him to stop. She had hidden bottles. She had pleaded with him after his worst nights. Nothing changed. Instead, Thomas began blaming Clara for everything that went wrong. If the crops failed, it was because she had not worked hard enough. If money disappeared, it was because she spent too much. If the roof leaked, it was because she had not repaired it correctly. If he lost a hand of cards, somehow that became her fault too. Clara had learned not to argue. Arguing only made things worse. So she worked. She worked until her back hurt. She worked until her fingers cracked. She worked because there was nobody else. That evening, Clara had spent most of the afternoon helping an elderly neighbor whose horse had injured its leg. She had not wanted to leave the animals suffering. Because of that, she had not finished repairing their own wagon wheel. It was a small thing. But when Thomas returned after sunset, drunk and angry, it was enough. He stumbled through the front door and looked at the broken wagon wheel. His face hardened. "What is this?" Clara lowered her eyes. "I was going to finish it tonight." "You were going to?" "Yes, father." Thomas laughed bitterly. "You're always going to do something." Clara swallowed. "Dawson, her horse." "I don't care about Mrs. Dawson." His fist struck the table. Clara flinched. "You couldn't even finish one simple job." "I'll repair it." "You always say that." Thomas grabbed a cup and threw it against the wall. The sound made Clara jump. "You're worthless, Clara." The words seemed to freeze the room. Clara stared at him. Thomas continued. "You hear me? Worthless." She said nothing. "You can't bring money into this house. You can't keep anything working. You can't even find yourself a husband." Her eyes burned. Thomas stepped closer. "Who would want a woman like you?" That question hurt more than anything else, because Clara had asked herself the same thing many times. Thomas pointed toward the door. "Go fix that fence." "But it's dark." "I said go." Clara picked up the lantern. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him that she had worked all day. She wanted to remind him that without her, there would be no food on the table. Instead, she whispered, "Yes, father." She stepped outside. The night air was cold. Clara walked toward the broken fence with the lantern swinging from her hand. Once she was far enough from the house, the tears finally came. She wiped them away quickly. She hated crying. Her mother had once told her that tears were not weakness. But Clara had learned that crying in front of Thomas only gave him another reason to insult her, so she cried silently. She knelt beside the fence and tried to fit the broken boards together. Her fingers trembled. The lantern flame flickered. The wind grew stronger. Clara looked toward the sky. Stars filled the darkness. For one moment, she imagined walking away. Just walking. Leaving the house. Leaving the debts. Leaving her father's anger. Leaving everything. But where would she go? She had no money. No family nearby. No horse. No protection. She lowered her head. Maybe there really was something wrong with her. Maybe her father was right. Maybe she was worthless. The thought escaped her lips before she could stop it. Maybe I am. A voice answered from behind her. No. Clara froze. Her hand immediately reached for the piece of wood beside her. She turned. A man stood several yards away. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in traditional frontier clothing. His long black hair was tied back, and the moonlight revealed the calm expression on his face. He was Apache. Clara's heart began pounding. She had heard stories about Apache warriors all her life. Most of those stories had been told by frightened settlers who knew little about the people they feared. But the man standing before her did not move toward her. He kept his distance. His hands were visible. His voice remained calm. My name is Taza. Clara said nothing. Taza glanced toward the house, then back at her. You should not be here alone. Clara tightened her grip on the wood. I can take care of myself. Taza studied her for a moment, then he nodded. I believe you. The answer surprised her. Most men would have laughed. Most men would have told her she was foolish. Taza simply believed her. Clara lowered the piece of wood slightly. Why are you here? I was traveling through the valley. He paused. I saw you earlier. Clara frowned. When? This afternoon. She remembered. The old woman's horse, the water bucket, the stranger standing near the distant trail. You saw me? Yes. She looked away. I wasn't doing anything important. Taza's expression changed slightly. You helped an injured animal. Clara shrugged. It needed help. You gave your own food to a traveler. He was hungry. You carried water to an old woman who could not. Walk to the well. Clara stared at him. Taza continued. You repaired your neighbor's gate. Clara looked down. I suppose. Taza stepped no closer. Then he said the sentence that would remain with Clara for the rest of her life. A person who is worthless does not spend her life trying to keep everyone else alive. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She turned her face away. Don't. Don't what? Don't be kind to me. Taza was silent. Clara wiped her cheeks. You don't know me. I know what I have seen. My father knows me. Taza looked toward the house. Does he? The question was gentle. That somehow made it hurt more. Clara shook her head. He says I'm useless. Taza looked at the broken fence, then at her hands, then at the lantern. He is wrong. Clara wanted to believe him. But believing him felt dangerous. Because if Taza was right, then Clara would have to accept that she had spent years believing a lie. And that meant facing another painful truth. Her father had not simply failed to appreciate her. He had deliberately convinced her that she was nothing. Clara began crying again. Taza did not approach. He did not touch her. He simply stood nearby. That restraint made Clara feel safer than any comforting gesture could have. After several moments, she whispered, Why do you care? Taza looked toward the stars. Because I know what it is like when someone tries to make you believe you are less than you are. Clara looked at him, but he did not explain. There were things in his own past that he carried quietly. Pain recognized pain. Neither needed to explain everything. The wind suddenly extinguished Clara's lantern. Darkness surrounded them. Clara sighed. I can't even keep a lantern burning. Taza almost smiled. You are tired. She looked at him. That is different from being worthless. Clara stared at the darkness. Nobody had ever separated those two things for her. She had always believed that exhaustion meant failure, that mistakes meant failure, that poverty meant failure, that needing help meant failure. But Taza spoke as though those things were simply human. He stepped toward the fence. Clara watched him. "What are you doing?" "Your fence. I can repair it." "I know." He picked up a loose board. "Then help me." For the next several minutes, they worked without speaking. Taza held the board steady. Clara hammered the nail. They worked together. No commands, no insults, no anger, just cooperation. When the final board was secure, Taza stepped back. "It will hold until morning." Clara looked at the repaired section. She could hardly believe it. "Thank you." Taza nodded. "You should sleep." Clara looked toward the house. "I can't." "Why?" "My father will be angry." Became serious. "Your father's anger is not your responsibility." Clara had never heard those words before. She looked at him. Taza mounted his horse. Before leaving, he turned back. "You are not what he called you." Clara's voice was barely audible. "Then, what am I?" Taza paused. "You will have to decide that." Then he rode into the darkness. Clara stood beside the repaired fence long after he disappeared. For the first time in years, she did not hear her father's voice inside her head. She heard Taza's instead. Not loudly, not forcefully, just quietly. "You are not what he called you." The next morning, Clara woke before sunrise. She walked outside. The fence was still standing. She touched the repaired board. Then she looked toward the horizon. Something inside her had changed. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. Hope. Not the kind that promised everything would become easy. The kind that whispered that perhaps her life could become something different. Clara still had the same poor house, the same debts, the same father, the same broken wagon. But she no longer had the same understanding of herself. And somewhere beyond the hills, an Apache named Taza continued riding beneath the morning sky, unaware that one quiet sentence had begun changing a woman's entire life. The weeks after that night changed Clara Bennett in ways nobody in the settlement noticed at first. From the outside, she looked exactly the same. She still woke before sunrise. She still carried water from the well. She still fed the chickens, milked the cow, repaired clothing, and prepared meals. She still kept her father's house standing when the roof leaked and the walls needed patching. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time in years, Clara questioned the voice that had told her she was worthless. It was still there. Her father's voice had lived inside her mind for too long to disappear after one conversation. Whenever she made a mistake, she heard him. Whenever she dropped something, she heard him. Whenever she counted the few coins left in the kitchen drawer, she heard him. Worthless. But now, another voice answered. A person who is worthless does not spend her life trying to keep everyone else alive. Clara did not know why those words mattered so much. Perhaps because Taza had not said them to make her feel better. He had said them because he had watched her. He had seen things her father refused to see. That difference slowly gave Clara courage. One morning, she discovered that their only remaining healthy horse was gone. She ran outside and found Thomas standing beside the empty stall. "Where is the horse?" Thomas didn't answer. "Father, I sold it." Clara stared at him. "You sold him?" "I needed the money." "For what?" Thomas glared at her. "That is none of your business." Clara looked at the empty stall. Without that horse, they could not transport supplies to town. They could barely carry enough water from the distant well. "You promised you wouldn't sell him." Thomas laughed. "I don't remember promising you anything." Clara felt something inside her snap. "You sold the horse to pay a gambling debt." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "You've been listening to gossip. You told me yourself last night." He stepped toward her. "And what are you going to do about it?" Clara looked at him. For years, she would have lowered her eyes. This time, she didn't. "I'll find a way." Thomas laughed. "You?" The word carried all the old contempt. You couldn't run a farm if your life depended on it. Clara almost answered. Then she remembered Taza. You are not what he called you. She walked away. That afternoon, Clara took a basket of bread into town. She had baked it from the last of their flour. At first, nobody wanted to buy it. Then, Mrs. Snap Dawson tasted a piece. She bought the entire basket. The next week, Clara made preserves. Then she started sewing blankets. Soon, people began asking for her work. Clara discovered something important. Her father had mistaken quietness for weakness. She was not weak. She was simply patient. And patience on the frontier was often more valuable than strength. One afternoon, Clara was returning home with several coins tied into a small cloth pouch when she saw Taza near the creek. He was sitting beside his horse. He looked up. Clara. She stopped. You remember my name. I remember many things. She smiled faintly. He noticed the pouch in her hand. You have been working. Yes. For yourself? Clara hesitated. For my home. Taza nodded. That is good. Clara sat on a nearby rock. I sold bread. I know. She looked at him. How? I bought some. Her eyes widened. You bought my bread? Taza's mouth lifted into the faintest smile. It was good. Clara laughed. It was the first genuine laugh she had shared with a man in years. Taza watched her carefully. Then he said, You look different. Clara looked down at her dress. Different? Stronger. She smiled. I don't feel strong. You do not have to feel strong to be strong. The words stayed with her. But peace did not last. Thomas noticed the money Clara was earning. At first, he demanded it. Clara refused. That made him furious. You live under my roof, he said. I worked for that money. It belongs to this family. I am this family. Thomas slammed his fist onto the table. You are my daughter, and I am not your property. Silence filled the room. Clara immediately realized what she had said. Thomas stared at her as though he had never seen her before. Then he raised his hand. Before he could strike her, a voice came from the doorway. Don't. Taza stood there. Thomas turned, his face reddened. Get off my land. Taza didn't move. This is a family matter. Taza looked at Clara. Do you want me to leave? Clara was stunned. She had expected him to decide for her. Instead, he asked her. She swallowed. No. Taza remained. Thomas pointed toward him. You think you can come here and steal my daughter? Taza's voice remained calm. She is not something to steal. Thomas laughed bitterly. You don't belong here. Taza did not react to the insult. I did not come for you. He looked at Clara. I came because she deserves to be safe. Thomas stepped forward. She needs a man to control her. Taza's eyes hardened. No. Thomas sneered. You think she can survive without a man? Taza answered quietly. She already has. Clara felt tears rising. Thomas stared at him. Taza continued. You keep calling her weak because you are afraid she will discover she is stronger than you. The room went silent. Thomas looked at Clara. For perhaps the first time, he saw something he had refused to acknowledge. She was standing straight. She was not trembling. She was not begging. She was looking directly at him. Clara finally understood. Her father's insults had never been proof of her weakness. They had been tools of control. If she believed she was worthless, she would never leave. If she believed she was incapable, she would never challenge him. If she believed nobody else could want her, she would remain trapped. Thomas needed her to believe those things, because if she ever stopped believing them, he would lose his power over her. That realization frightened Clara, but it also freed her. That night, she began planning. She would leave. Not immediately, not recklessly. She would save enough money. She would find a safe place. She would make arrangements. And she would leave, because she chose to. Several weeks passed. Clara's small business continued growing. She had enough money to rent a small building near the trading road. For the first time, she could imagine a life that belonged to her. Then, disaster came. Thomas returned home one evening drunk. He had been gambling again. He stumbled toward the barn. Clara tried to stop him. "Father, please go inside. Don't tell me what to do." He pushed past her. A few minutes later, Clara heard a crash. She ran outside. Thomas had fallen from the loft. He lay on the ground, injured and unconscious. Clara froze. Every cruel memory returned. The insults, the broken furniture, the threats, the humiliation. She could walk away. Nobody would blame her. She could leave him there and start the new life she had dreamed about. Then she remembered her mother. She remembered the woman who had once taught her that kindness did not depend on whether someone deserved it. Clara ran for help. Taza arrived before the doctor. Together, they carried Thomas inside. Taza treated the injury, while Clara heated water. Hours passed. Thomas survived. When he finally opened his eyes, Clara was sitting beside him. He looked at her. For once, he didn't insult her. He simply whispered, "Why?" Clara didn't understand. "Why did you help me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because I chose to." Thomas turned his face away. Clara continued, "But helping you doesn't mean I will stay." He looked back. "What?" "I am leaving." Thomas stared at her. Clara stopped. The words stood between them, heavy and clear. Aura's voice shook, but she didn't stop. "I will not spend the rest of my life afraid of you." Thomas said nothing. Taza stood outside the doorway. He did not interfere. This was Clara's decision. When Clara stepped outside later, Taza was waiting beside his horse. "You saved him," he said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I don't want to become cruel." Taza nodded. "That is strength." Clara looked toward the road. "I am scared." "So am I, sometimes." She looked at him. "You?" Taza nodded. "Courage is not the absence of fear." He paused. "It is deciding what matters more." Clara looked at the horizon. For the first time she knew what mattered more. Her future, her freedom, her dignity, her right to choose, and perhaps someday, love. But she would not run from one prison into another. If she chose Taza, it would not be because she needed a man to save her. It would be because she wanted him beside her. Taza seemed to understand. He never asked her to leave with him. He simply said, "When you are ready, choose your road." Clara smiled. "I think I already have." Behind them the old homestead stood in silence. Ahead lay an uncertain future. But Clara was no longer the frightened daughter who had knelt beside a broken fence, believing she was worthless. She was becoming a woman who knew her own strength. And for the first time, the road ahead belonged to her. D. Several months had passed since Clara Bennett walked away from the old homestead. The Arizona sun rose over the distant mesas, turning the desert sky gold. Clara stood outside a small wooden building beside the main trading road. The sign above the door read, "Bennett Goods." It was not a grand store. There were no polished windows, no expensive decorations, no wealthy customers waiting outside. But it belonged to her. Every board had been purchased with money she had earned herself. Every shelf had been built by her own hands. Every jar of preserves, every loaf of bread, every blanket hanging inside, represented something more than a product. They represented freedom. Clara unlocked the door. Morning sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. She smiled. A year earlier, she would never have believed such a morning was possible. Back then, she had lived in a house where every mistake became an excuse for humiliation. Now, she had her own keys, her own business, her own money. Most importantly, her own decisions. But freedom did not erase the past. Sometimes Clara still woke during the night, expecting to hear her father's footsteps. Sometimes she heard his voice in her head. Worthless. Whenever that happened, she reminded herself of the sentence that had changed everything. A person who is worthless does not spend her life trying to keep everyone else alive. Yet Clara had discovered something even more important. She did not have to spend her life proving that she was valuable. Her worth had never depended on how much work she could do. It had never depended on whether her father approved of her. And it certainly did not depend on whether a man wanted her. She was worthy simply because she was human. That realization had taken months. Through mistakes, through loneliness, through fear, through small victories. One morning Clara heard a horse approaching. She looked up. Taza rode toward the store. Her heart skipped. He had been away for several weeks, traveling north with members of his people. Clara stepped outside. Taza dismounted. "You have been busy." She smiled. "You noticed." "I always notice." He looked at the store. "It is yours?" Clara nodded. "Yes." Taza smiled. "You built it?" "With help." "Whose?" Clara laughed. "Mostly mine." Taza nodded approvingly. They stood together in silence. There was no rush, no demand, no expectation. That was what Clara appreciated most about him. Taza never made her feel as though she owed him something. After a while he asked, "Are you happy?" Clara thought carefully. She could have answered immediately, but she wanted to be honest. "Yes." Taza smiled. "Good." Clara looked at him. "That's all you're going to say?" "What should I say?" "I don't know." Taza leaned against the fence. "I came to see whether you had found what you wanted. And if I had, then I would be glad." Clara's expression softened. "And if I hadn't? Then I would ask whether you wanted help finding it." She smiled. That was Taza. Always offering, never demanding. But before Clara could say anything else, a rider came rushing into town. He shouted that several outlaws had been robbing isolated businesses along the trading road. Clara's smile disappeared. The man pointed toward the western trail. "They're coming this way." People began closing doors. Merchants hurried to hide their money. The town became tense. Taza looked toward the road. "How many?" "6 or 7. Taza nodded. Clara looked at her store. She had spent months building it. She wasn't going to lose it without a fight. Taza looked at her. "You should leave." Clara shook her head. "No." "Clara, this is mine." Taza studied her. "You don't have to prove anything." "I know." She looked toward the road. "I am not staying because I need to prove I am brave." "Then why?" "Because I refuse to keep running." Taza nodded. That answer pleased him. Clara went inside. She locked the front door. Then she moved the shelves. She had learned something from living on the frontier. A building could be turned into a fortress if you understood its weaknesses. She secured the windows, moved heavy barrels near the back entrance, placed the cash box beneath the floorboards. Then she waited. The outlaws arrived shortly before sunset. Their leader kicked open the door. "Give us your money." Behind the counter. Her heart was pounding, but she did not tremble. "There isn't much." The outlaw laughed. "You're the owner?" "Yes." "Then you know where the money is." Clara looked toward the rear shelves. "There." The man turned. Clara had deliberately pointed toward a locked chest filled with worthless metal scraps. The outlaw smashed it open. His expression darkened. "You lied." Clara stepped backward. "You didn't ask the right question." He lunged toward her. At that moment, Taza and 2 riders appeared outside. The confrontation erupted. But Clara did not simply hide. She grabbed the heavy iron lantern and knocked it from the outlaw's hand. The man stumbled. Taza moved quickly. Within moments, the outlaws were fleeing. The danger passed almost as quickly as it had arrived. Clara stood in the doorway breathing heavily. One window was shattered. A shelf had collapsed. Several jars had broken on the floor. She looked around. Her store was damaged, but it was still standing. Taza approached. "Are you hurt?" "No." He looked at her hands. "They are shaking." Clara smiled. "I'm scared." Taza nodded. "You should be." She looked at him. "But I stayed." "Yes." "Was that foolish?" "No." "Brave?" "Yes." Clara looked toward the broken window. "I don't think I'm the same woman anymore." Taza smiled. "No." She laughed softly. "That's probably a good thing." The following morning, Clara began repairing the store. She swept broken glass from the floor. She repaired the shelf. She replaced the damaged jars. The town helped. Dawson brought fresh bread. The blacksmith repaired the window frame. A rancher brought lumber. People who once barely noticed Clara now respected her. Not because she had become someone else, because they had finally seen the strength that had always been there. Later that afternoon, Thomas arrived. Clara stopped working. Her father looked older. The years of drinking had left deep lines across his face. He stood outside the doorway. "I heard what happened," he said. Clara said nothing. "You fought them?" "I protected my store." Thomas looked at the sign. "Your store." "Yes." He lowered his head. "I was wrong." Clara's chest tightened. She had imagined hearing those words many times. But now that they had arrived, they did not feel like victory. They felt sad. Thomas continued. "I spent years blaming you." Clara remained silent. "I thought if I made you feel small, I would feel bigger." His voice cracked. "I was wrong." Clara looked at him. "Why did you do it?" Thomas swallowed. "Because I hated myself." The answer hurt, not because she excused him, but because she finally understood that his cruelty had never been evidence of her worth. Thomas had been fighting his own failures. He had simply used her as the target. "I am sorry," he whispered. Clara looked away. "I forgive you." Thomas looked surprised. "But?" Clara turned back. He nodded slowly. "I understand. You can visit." Another pause. "But you cannot hurt me anymore." Thomas nodded. "I won't." He walked away. Clara watched until he disappeared. She felt strangely empty. Not because she had lost him, because she had finally stopped needing his approval. That evening, Taza returned. He stood beside the repaired fence, outside the store. Clara noticed him. "You saw?" "I saw." "My father came." "I know." She looked at him. "I forgave him." Taza nodded. "That was your choice." Clara smiled. "You always say that." "Because it is true." They stood beneath the setting sun. The desert was quiet. Clara looked toward the horizon. "Taza?" "Yes?" "What if I told you I wanted you to stay?" He looked at her. "Why?" She smiled. "Because I want you here." "Not because you need me?" "No." "Not because you're afraid?" "No." "Then why?" Clara stepped closer. "Because I love you." Taza's expression softened. He reached for her hand. "I love you too." There was no dramatic declaration, no grand promise. Just two people standing beneath a desert sky, choosing each other freely. Then, at Taza. "I used to think my life was over. And now?" She smiled. "Now I think it is finally beginning." Taza squeezed her hand. The sun disappeared behind the mesas. Clara remembered the night she had once stood beside a broken fence, crying because her father had called her worthless. She remembered the stranger who had stepped from the darkness. She remembered his quiet voice. A person who is worthless does not spend her life trying to keep everyone else alive. But now she understood that the sentence had never been about earning worth. She had never needed to prove anything. She had simply needed someone to help her see the truth. Her father had told her who he wanted her to believe she was. Taza had reminded her that she could decide for herself. And Clara had finally chosen. Not her father's fear, not her past, not a life built around suffering. She chose freedom. She chose dignity. She chose forgiveness without surrender. And finally, she chose love. As night settled over the Arizona frontier, the lights inside Bennett Goods glowed warmly against the darkness. Clara closed the door. Taza waited beside her. Together, they walked beneath the stars, and for the first time in her life, Clara did not wonder whether she was worthy.